right. So again, welcome everybody. I'm going to minimize everybody for just a minute here, and I'll still be up here. But I want you all to feel more prepared after this webinar to kind of know what your choices are and know how to access those. We're going to go over a lot of different sort of topics to consider as you're creating your birth preferences. And yeah, I just take notes and ask questions. I want to make sure that you guys feel comfortable with what the information that's being delivered. All right, so thinking about what that plan is. And I think the one thing that I mentioned earlier, for those of you who are here earlier, is that you may hear this called different things. And I have had, as a doula over the years, I have had people say, well, it's really not a birth plan. Some people look at your writing down your wishes as like this contract that you need your provider to sign it off on this, and that you know, that if you don't follow that, then you're not being supportive of my wishes. And so I think it's really more of thinking of the birth plan as looking at what would you like to have in your experience moving through your labor and birth. What are the options? And then having sort of conversations with your birth team. So it's definitely your partner, your support person, maybe your doula, your providers. So speaking directly about your wishes with them, as well as providing those to the other people who are going to be supporting you on the day of, like your nurses. So this also is a way for them to get to know you, because sometimes you don't really get to have an intimacy or a really true connection with those people as you're moving through. It's more sometimes a little bit shallow. And this is a way that they can kind of get to know you and share about yourself a little bit. So let's get started. All right, so the elements of a birth plan. Really lots of different things here. There's no one right way to create this. There's also, you know, it's one of those things that I always preface that when you make choices about what you would like for your labor and birth, everybody's going to be different. And what's right for you may not be right for your friend, or was right for your sister when she had her baby. So just note that you think about what you really desire and what feels comfortable for you, because that's going to be a super important piece to this. So in a birth plan, it's going to really contain sort of some details regarding those kind of factors, such as who would you like to have present, and where are you going to be situated in the room, which doctors and nurses that you'd like to be involved. This may be a choice, this may not. And then your stance regarding the medical care and advice, your environment, things that come up, and those, I don't want to call them emergencies, but situations that come up. What would your preferences be in that situation? And as we go through the process of creating it, keep in mind that during labor, your decisions might not reflect beliefs or prior assumptions regarding these aspects. So it helps to consider all of these things kind of beforehand and understand the possibilities. And really this is the main reason that a birth plan can be so effective, is that it removes the added pressure of having to make those tough decisions in an already uncomfortable and vulnerable space. Especially if this is your first experience with birth, you feel a little bit more vulnerable because you're going through each of these experiences for the first time ever. You're in this situation for the first time ever. And sometimes we just need to be able to focus on the act of laboring and birthing, and having conversations and making those decisions, and can be a little bit more difficult. So we really, having that birth plan is a really great reference tool so that the people supporting you know your wishes. So you could also take into account what's feasible, what is understood and commonly practiced, so those policies at your choice facility, and ensure that everyone involved is aware of any deviations from that you have away from what is normally practiced there. So having those conversations in advance. It helps us mentally prepare as well. And sometimes, especially in certain situations, your providers are willing to make adjustments and changes that are not necessarily a standard of care. And I think it's important as the birthing parents that you know that the worst thing that can happen is that they say no. So let's talk about the environment in which we would like to give birth. So I want you to just think about, where would you like, even if, say this is not, if you've already decided where you're going to give birth, let's back up a step. Imagine that you are newly pregnant and you start deciding and thinking about the birth environment. So what would that ideal birth environment look like? Visualize it. Thinking about that environment, why does that feel comfortable to you? What about that environment brings you peace, right? What makes you feel calm about that environment? And then thinking about the environment that you chose or are choosing, and how can you create something similar from that visualized birth. I think that's the one thing that can be super helpful, is what modifications can I have on the choices that I've made that can accommodate me and make me feel calm and at peace during my experience. And just kind of knowing that you're going to have to give, there's going to be this give and take. If there's any things that might hinder your ability to have that, having conversations with your provider, seeing if there's any adjustments. I don't ever really push people to change their provider, but I have had parents who have supported, who have decided that that's the best choice for them. So sometimes that's a good thing to consider, because there are limitations to certain providers and facilities that are just not going to provide you with what you need. So if you're in the situation where you may be on the fence with that, just know that talk it over with your partner and consider that as an option. If you would, guys, make sure that you're muted right now so the recording doesn't have background noise in it. Thanks so much. All right. So I'm going to give you guys a link that you can help think about that more. One of the other things to consider is time of year in which you might be giving birth, distance to the place that you're going to be giving birth. When you think about your plans and thinking about all those scenarios, so that you don't feel knocked off guard with that. All right, so let's talk quickly here about what the physical environment versus that psychological environment looks like, how it can be a factor in your choices for creating that, your preferences. Well, it's really vital, I think, to first determine your physical environment in which you want to welcome your little one. It is really important to consider your own psychological state during birth. So labor can be a state sort of intense, and sometimes just like tension. The body's in a very physical and active state. And it makes sense to limit anxiety, right, as much as possible in leading up to the actual event. So part of this, and you've taken the first step, right, is by contemplating and compiling your birth preferences. Another part is by encouraging as much calm, stress easing, and um, personalized factors to the birth environment, which could be such as allowing to allow you to kind of reach that optimal state of ease, just tranquility, peace. We want the birthing parent to be really at ease, both physically and emotionally. It will assist and aid in her ability to move forward with birth. Just thinking about a soothing environment is an environment that helps lower those stress hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol, which are released sometimes when we feel stress, right? And we feel unsafe. So if you're planning a hospital birth, you may consider how you'd feel if maybe you could bring a little bit of personalization into your space. How would that make you feel? We utilize all our senses, and during labor, our senses are heightened. You may have noticed during pregnancy, you kind of have heightened senses. So maybe we want to change the lighting. What can we bring into that space? Can we bring some electric candles? Can we bring a string of lights? Maybe we are want some flashy, like Christmas lights. I mean, maybe we're very festive. What brings you a sense of peace or connection to yourself and to maybe the season, or to, some people think about birth as a celebration or party. So thinking about that, what does your, what kind of like senses? So smell, so sense of smell. Do you want to bring in maybe some essential oils? Some facilities I work with have diffusers, and you can use their diffusers, or they may allow you to bring in your own. So those scents of smell. And along with the sense of smell, I've had a lot of moms who really feel comfortable bringing their own pillows or their own blankets that really calm them and bring them a sense of peace and, during their labor. Sometimes those things can have a really wonderful calming psychological effect. So I will send you guys a study in the email that talks more about cultivating that safe and calm psychological environment for birth. I really think it's a huge important factor that sometimes we just forget about, or we're not sure how to proceed with. Right, so miscommunication. The great thing about having clear and concise written wishes is that it really helps you to avoid miscommunication, right, between you and your birth team. As we talked about before, those elevated levels of stress hormones are combined with physical discomfort are not really the best psychological circumstances really for you to make those important decisions. So by considering really all of the outcomes before the onset of labor, you reduce that, reduce the risk of having miscommunication and eliminating conflict. And we really want to eliminate those scenarios in birth as much as possible. We want it to flow freely. So we will talk about talking with your birth providers, bringing that conversation up in your prenatals, using that birth plan as a tool for understanding how they feel about it. And a lot of us are also going to have several providers. So definitely take that to several visits so you get feedback from different providers and see their response. One of the things that I do as a doula is often help parents sort of come up with language to be able to have conversations with providers. Some of us do get white coat syndrome, and so we kind of forget or just kind of don't feel comfortable having those conversations. So in a specific scenario, for instance, saying, you wanted to ask about a particular aspect of what you wanted to do in after the baby was born. So saying, I'm interested in having delayed cord clamping. And I would like to wait until the cord stops pulsing before it is clamped so that my baby receives all of the download of the blood from the placenta. Do you feel like I need to have this in my plan, or is it a standard policy? So this would be an example. And why I say that is because sometimes when we have conversations and we go in and we hand them this piece of paper and we say, what do you think? Most of the time, right, they may not necessarily have time to really address that in your prenatal visits. So asking them specific questions around areas that you really are curious about can be a really great way to help start those conversations, or maybe emailing it to your provider so that they have a longer time to be able to give you a response. You can also note that printing out several copies for your birth team to take in your hospital bag is really important. So this plan really is a preference of your statement, like a statement of your goals and your wishes, right? For your labor, your birth, and your entire hospital stay. It's not really that contract. And it's really important to be aware of, while a good birth team will ensure your plan is followed to their best of their abilities, circumstances will often arise during birthing which might require a slight or complete deviation from those wishes. So flexibility, I think that when we look at this, I really want parents to put down what they really want. I don't want you to assume that things are going to happen, because they might not. And I think, as a doula, I'm always there to help consider the preferences that these parents have, and doing everything I can to help you achieve those. And I think, for the most part, most of your labor and delivery nurses are doing the same thing, as well as providers. So I think that trust is really important. It's one of the things that helps us feel calm, knowing that we are all on the same page and that we're doing our best to create that experience and those outcomes that you really want. Another thing to note, some providers find it reassuring to have sort of information of a case of emergency. So if you have that on your birth plan, a contact, you might want to add that to your list. Okay. So medication preferences. One of the, I would feel like, larger elements of your preferences should be clearly stating your wishes regarding medication preferences, those that you prefer. If you decide you wanted to have an epidural, that could be on there, but you might want to give more detailed information, like, I would like to have my epidural during active labor. So if that helps give the providers and nurses and doulas guidance on when to kind of help support you. Because we know, like, if you want to have it in active labor, that we're going to help support you to get to that point so that you can get your epidural. If you're trying to have an unmedicated birth, then we're really going to note that you may be not wanting us to offer that, because that wouldn't be very supportive of your wishes. So we're not going to be going, labor and delivery nurses, no, honey, do you need something for that? Or they often say, are you ready for your epidural? Those kind of things. If you write it on your birth plan, you're not going to have that. And I think they want to be supportive, but if we don't note it in our preferences, then they're used to, they're used to supporting women in that way. So just note that. Let's see. One thing I do say about medication preferences, and we talk about the different options of medications in our childbirth education classes. So one of the things to note, you may be able to have conversations with your provider. Sometimes you can have a consult with the anesthesiologist before your birth. Some hospitals allow that and encourage that. So understanding and knowing that is really important. Also knowing that if you think that you want a specific way, and when you're in labor, you decide, oh gosh, I totally changed my mind. I thought that I wanted that, but I don't anymore. That's totally okay too. Sometimes we can use code words with our partners and our doulas and our support team to help us say like, okay, watermelon, I changed my mind. I want this. Or it can go both ways. I thought I wanted medication, but I don't. I feel like I can handle this and I really want to try. The labor is moving very smoothly. And I feel really strong. So there's lots of different ways that can go, and just know that it's okay for you to change your mind. Some parents find it very helpful to think about the pain medications preference scale and where you feel you are on that prior to giving birth. A lot of us have not ever had any major pain in our lives prior to giving birth. And so we talk about this in childbirth ed, but your uterus is this huge, tremendous, strong muscle of your body. And to be able to expel your baby out, it has to contract. It makes these big, strong surges to help push your baby down and out. And that takes a lot of energy. And that energy is working through your body. And it's going to be tremendous. But I will say that I have, over the years, seen some women have a very easier time of that and others not. So we do have differences in our pain scale. And there is a tool that I will send in the email called the Pain Medications Preference Scale. That was written by Penny Simpkin, who's the author of the Birth Partner. So that might be a good tool for you all as you're moving through this, to think about it before. I always kind of imagine birth as sort of this like training for a marathon, a really big physical event that you also have to mentally prepare for. But that might be really helpful. And I'll send you guys some links to be able to look at that as well. All right. So let's think about those requests, those before birth requests, right? Thinking about what's happening before birth. We want to ensure your peace of mind and calm before everything starts. These definitely may not necessarily be something that is written for your medical team, but it may be something that you talk about with your partner or your doula. Kind of those requests that can be made and known by the people who are going to be by your side and be there to support you. Things such as the basic elements of your birthing environment. So we talked about setting the scene, so to speak. Those might not necessarily have to be written in unless they're outside of the hospital policies. So you don't need to write in your birth plan, I want to use music to help me get through things. If your partner or doula knows that, right, they can help do that. They can help. Sometimes a statement such as, I hope to have several supportive things such as music, positions, different things to help me achieve my goal of an unmedicated birth. And that would be a statement that kind of paints a picture of you and what your preferences are, but doesn't take up your entire birth plan, telling the nurses something that they don't necessarily have to do for you. I think that's the best way to look at that. If you have a desire to have a specific provider present, you can always request that, but it's not always able to happen these days, as most of the practices have a rotation with that. But if you have a doula that's coming to be there present or virtually present, you want to add that into your birth plan so that they know that. They know you have that support. Things about eating and drinking. So sometimes these things can be super important, and it's very different at different, it's very different from facility to facility on what they allow. So it is important that you have that conversation and find out what is allowed as far as eating and drinking policies. Some are just clear liquids. Some have, are more flexible. I did go to one hospital years back where they were like ice chips only. It was really interesting. There was no water, but ice chips were the only thing you could have. And since then, of course, they've changed that policy, thank goodness, but it is really nice to know. It's also nice to know what is available at the hospital that you can have. So in clear liquids, like if they have typically have Jello, maybe some popsicles, juices, water, ice chips, they're not going to have coconut water most likely for you, but you can bring your own coconut water because it is in a clear liquids. They may have broth as a clear liquid, but it'll be kind of like a powdered packet. And it works. It does have a little bit of nutrients in it, but you may consider bringing in your own broth as a clear liquid and talking to your provider about that, because it may have a little bit more nutrients to help give you that energy that you need, but still be on the clear liquid scale. Some women really want to be able to move around in what they call in the medical term ambulate. But some women really are tired and want to rest. And that kind of depends on how your labor has begun, whether you've been induced or had spontaneous labor, lots of different things there. And note, at any time, you can always change that. But letting them know that you're interested in that, they may decide to try to give you a remote monitor so that you are a wireless monitor so you can move around more. So those kind of requests can be really helpful for your birthing team and for you. We talked about personalizing all of the space by bringing in your own things. Do note if you are interested in having tools like a birth ball or a peanut ball or things like that, you may want to call ahead to make sure that those facilities have them, that they're not deflated or maybe broken, or they're running low on them on the day that you go in, they're already all taken up. So that's something that you can call your labor and delivery and have a conversation with that, because if you want to use those, you may just bring yours and stick it in the car so that if you need to get it, it's there for you. All right. Let's talk a little bit about birthing positions. So when we think about what are your choices with birthing positions and breathing techniques, you can see that this couple is working hard together. There's, using the water and tub to help support the process. This mom is also using nitrous oxide, which is not available in most hospitals, especially during COVID, because it is a respiratory, delivered through the respiratory, but can be a great tool to know what your possibilities. So let's talk a little bit about that. At High Country Doulas, we teach a wonderful class called Comfort Measures, and that is for you and your partner to kind of walk through all those different possibilities to support their coping techniques, to help partners feel like they have those tools and understand how they can support you and help you. But familiarizing yourself with the positions that can help take lessen the sensations of those contractions can be so helpful, because otherwise we just kind of are like, what do we do? Where should I be? And then we just do whatever the nurses tell us to, which is maybe sit in bed and try to rest, which may not necessarily be super helpful if that's the position that makes your contractions feel the most painful, right? So it is really helpful to make sure that you understand and know those prior to your birth. Okay, so there are some labor and delivery nurses who really know about these, so sometimes that can be helpful too. But doulas and midwives are more familiar with those types of positions and types of breathing techniques to help you cope and to help guide you, your partner through labor as their support person. Another thing that I think I wanted to point out is prenatal yoga. So if you haven't tried yoga as a way to connect with your body and your baby and your breath, it is an amazing tool to help you feel more prepared as you move through your pregnancy closer to your labor and birth. I will send you guys some links to that in the email, follow-up email. Chelsea Bishop, she's one of our team members. She is a doula, a prenatal yoga instructor, and a childbirth educator. And she loves helping parents learn different positions and breathing techniques of yoga to help them prepare and feel more calm and confident moving towards their labor and birth. All right. Love this picture. This there's not many places that have a hanging strap in their birthing facility that you can use to just really pull against. It can be super helpful to take your hospital sheet and play tug of war with it during pushing. I've seen this happen, and in different ways to help support you. But some really more progressive facilities have really taken this to heart and really created a better space for women to be able to have these tools during their birth. So let's think about during labor. So the elements of during labor, these types, this time period for your birthing plan should be kind of more flexible. It is rare for everything to fall into place, every one of your wishes to fall into place, no matter how much we think about them during advance. So thinking about who is going to be present, right? Clarifying those wishes for partners and doulas. We've already kind of spoken to that. It is a pandemic, so we don't have access to having as many people present like we did in the past. But when the restrictions are lifted in those cases, if you end up being in that situation, I just want to make known, because I always speak to this for when we're thinking about who we want present. I really want to think about, you want people in your space who are going to make you feel confident. They're going to make you feel at peace, supported, and loved. They're not going to question what your choices are, and they're going to be super supportive. And this is really key. I think that a lot of clients I've worked with have had a struggle with that, sort of like figuring that out. Of course, COVID has taken all of those worries away because we just have limited choices. But in general, if you give birth again, or if maybe your hospital lifts those restrictions before you go into labor, thinking about, you can have visits and see people, but still request that they're not present for the times when you're really trying to focus on labor, because maybe they're anxious and their anxiousness may make you anxious. So I want to have that in there, because I think, we never know how things are going to head moving forward, but I want y'all to know that. In the event of any deviation from your wishes, also kind of informing your team of hypothetical situations and your wishes for these circumstances. So if you prefer, if something happens, giving them different scenarios. So you may have a section in there on, if I have a cesarean birth, what are some of the wishes that I want? If you also are delivering or birthing at a hospital that has students, so a teaching hospital, if you prefer no residents or students in your room, that is also something to note, to let your birthing team be aware of. You do have a right to say yes or no. So medications and procedures questions, when we talk about those understanding, being aware of your medication, really make sure that you know what all your choices are at your hospital. Make sure you take a childbirth education class to learn about those things, learn about the risk and benefits, so you understand how they affect you and baby and your choices. A lot of us, before we've given birth, don't have any experience taking those types of medications or how our body's going to respond to them. So it is good to kind of look at all of those things. And like I mentioned, if you have specific preferences surrounding what you'd like to happen in the event that you have a cesarean birth, if it's not a planned cesarean birth, you know, thinking, asking the questions like, are there cameras? Can I take pictures? Can I record? What aspects of the birth can I record? Can I have music? Is there one person allowed in, or can my doula come in too? So knowing those things helps you better prepare for that in that event scenario, so that you don't feel kind of like off guard. And I do often do a webinar on cesarean birth. So definitely check out our website to see if we have one of those coming up before you are due. Right, next is during birth, okay? Being really clear about what issues, scenarios, and procedures you are super comfortable with is another vital element of birth itself. If you're a type of person who really wants to know all the details about things explained to you in detail, you need to note that. That's really helpful for your provider. Sometimes they dumb down things, thinking that people just would rather not hear all the mumbo jumbo. But if you're one of those people that really needs to know all the details, walk me through this, please. It can be helpful to put that in your birth plan. Your provider is going to have spend more time focusing and answering questions with that as well. So thinking about during your birth, it's important to consider your views and feelings about the different factors of the things that are available. And this goes back to making sure you know your hospital's policy, take a childbirth ed class. So how do you feel about artificial rupture of the membranes or leaving the membranes intact? External and internal fetal monitoring, the use of an IV or catheter, the use of Pitocin, your practitioner's position on tearing versus episiotomy, the use of interventions like forceps and vacuum to assist in birth. It may be somewhat uncomfortable to think about these things, but it is vital that you consider these possibilities and what they are. How do you feel about them, so that you have these conversations with your doula and or your, of course, your partner, but if you have a doula present, so that they can help you in this event that might be your path. Okay. So after labor, some of the things to note on your birth plan as you're noting it are, what are your preferences for baby and for yourself right after the birth? So these can be just as important as your during labor preferences. But those golden hours after birth can seem so beautiful, and things happen so fast. And so having these written down is really important, because I will say that most of the parents that I see after birth are often speechless. I mean, you're so many hormones rushing through you, so many emotions. This is not the time for you to be asking for what your wishes are. So having those in a birth plan can then your partner or your doula can reference those. Oh, she really wanted to have this. She preferred that baby had this. And that's really helpful. It's a way of pre-communication that I think goes much smoother than trying to then say it, spout all those things. There's just no way that you can do it. So you're so exhausted, right? You're just having fatigue, so many emotions. It's just really hard. So thinking of considering, what do you see happening, and what do you know about the choices that you have during that situation? So do you really want to breastfeed, and do you want that to happen immediately? Who do you want to assist you? Do you want your doula? Do you want the labor and delivery nurse? Does your birthing facility have a lactation consultant who's there 24 hours access? If not, when are they available, and when will you be able to have access to see them? It's really important to state that I would like to have a visit from my lactation consultant. Most hospitals really want to see that happen, but occasionally it just kind of doesn't happen or gets missed out on. So it is really helpful to have that written. Thinking about the cord. So you can see here, this is a really a good example here of, you can see the clamp and you can see the cord coming out of baby's belly. And you can see that white or flaccid, meaning that the blood is not flowing through that cord anymore. So understanding what your choices are in cord clamping and having conversations about that, educating yourself about it. If you want to have an hour of bonding with your baby, most birthing facilities like to take baby and weigh them. It's like the baby nurse's one job, and they just got to have that weight, height. Typically, most facilities now are checking baby and monitoring baby on your chest. The only time they typically take baby away is in the situations where baby might be having some respiratory issues. Their APGAR score wasn't so good and they just need to check baby out. So in that case, they want to return baby back to you as soon as possible. But knowing those kind of things, do you want, if baby everything's going well, do you want to delay the weight and the height check so that you can have that time to use for bonding and breastfeeding? If so, you might want to note that in your plan. Let's see, some people do, along with that, delay the eye drops, the erythromycin eye drops, or some of the other things. I do have a sheet that I'm going to email to you guys about all of those standard of care for most birthing facilities for baby. So you'll understand what they are and what their purpose is. Special request about your placenta. So your placenta is yours if you want to keep it. You can take it and encapsulate it and use it for postpartum recovery. You can take it and plant it under a tree that signifies a special thing for you and your baby. A lot of birthing facilities also allow you to take that placenta and donate it for research purposes or to be used for stem cell. I have a client who is in works with stem cells for eye repair. So there's lots of amazing factors in your placenta, and people know it and they want to use it to help other people. It's also used for burn victims. If you have interest in cord blood banking, to be able to have cord blood to use at a later date, definitely I'll send out some information on that. So it's typically not covered, so it is paid out of pocket. But if it is important for you, maybe there's something genetically in your family that you really want to have that. There are lots of different companies that will do cord blood banking. All right, I'm going to take just a sip of water here. All right, so when you think about that plan, it can be really super helpful to consider all the scenarios. Sometimes that can be really anxiety inducing. So if you have anxiety or have that kind of stuff, sometimes it's better just to like hire a doula or be sure that you have a really good support system, because that way when you are in those situations, you have somebody there to help support you through it. But for a lot of couples, it can be really helpful to kind of like, this is what I'd like in this case. This is important to me if we have to do this, and having those conversations. So I think this is important, and I've mentioned this before, but it is important to know that you may very well have your ideal birth. You may have all those things. Just go perfectly. But considering things that could happen, if my provider recommends an induction and I agree to it, what would I like to happen? I know I have choices. These are the things I would prefer to happen. And so putting those in your birth plan can be helpful, or having your partner know about them and having conversations with your provider. So those two different situations can be super beneficial. I do work with couples who create more than one birth plan. So what I mean by that is that they create a birth plan that is the one they take in their bag and give to the labor nurses. And have a copy for the provider. There's also a larger birth plan that is for the partner and the doula, and also maybe the one you take and have a conversation with your providers at those prenatals that might include things like induction. Once you're at the hospital, you may already know about the whole induction thing, and you may not want to add that, but you may want to add the cesarean part in there. So I know that birth plans are one of those things that can evolve, right? And there may be more than one copy. But what we want to note is that we don't want to take in a 4-page plan to our labor and delivery nurses. We want it to be concise and clear and 1 page. And we will send out a really helpful tool that we have at High Country Doulas for writing that effective 1-page birth plan. It's going to be super helpful for you. So some of us may have some pre-existing medical conditions. Some of these may just come up during pregnancy. So they're pregnancy induced medical conditions. So regardless of those things, speaking to your doctor about what your options are with note to regarding your health conditions may be important. Maybe what's more likely to happen in the scenario, asking them those questions. With my condition, are there any things that I need to be prepared for or no? Things that I might not have access to, or maybe I have more choices in. So I do note that everybody's different, and what's right for you is going to be very different. But understanding all of your options can be super helpful in having those conversations with your provider, letting them hear what your worries and your concerns are super helpful. I will send you guys a little article about those health conditions that can impact our choices in birth if you may have those, so you can learn more about it. All right. So I'll also want to note that there's lots of sample birth plans out there, right? You can just Google birth plans and there's all these different birth plans out there. There are birth plans that have icons and they're just pictures. I've had a lot of partners who really love those. They're like, yes, so cool. You cannot put your birth plans up outside of your room. So duly noted that. I had a provider, a dad once who wanted to put it on the door. And I was like, no, I don't think that's okay. That's a HIPAA violation. But sometimes you can put it up in the room. They'll let you do that. But just having those conversations saying, hi, my name is this. I would really love to share our birth plan with you. We're very excited to have you on our team for baby Sarah's birth. And having those conversations are really important when you get started with your labor and in your birthing facility. But if you have looked up that and seen those sample birth plans, you're going to see all different kinds out there. And I will send you some links for some if you haven't yet looked at those. I will also send you our tool, which I think is super helpful because it talks specifically about creating that concise birth plan. But you may find some of the other ones helpful as well. So I want to offer all of those options for you. Just knowing that everybody's different. I do want to speak quickly to editing. So definitely for first-time parents, if you're in that situation as a first-time parent, you may be unsure about a lot of sort of the the elements of pregnancy, birth, and the postpartum. And you may have already started your birth plan and you then learn some more information. As you go along, editing your birth plan is normal. It's normal to alter and change your birth plan as you learn and grow more. And I think that's totally okay and understandable. We do not recommend for you to change your birth plan late in pregnancy unless it's something that happens health-wise, or you end up having scheduled cesarean, for instance. You may definitely want to change your birth plan. But sometimes we're very emotional in late pregnancy. And so sometimes changing things cannot be the right time during that. So important factors there. All right. Having your birth preferences written down or stated to the people who are going to be supporting you is going to allow you to feel more confident as you move forward, have a really positive sense and peace and sense of control that you may not have felt before that. Also, walking through a birth plan brings up lots of wonderful conversations with your partners, with your providers, with your doulas that can really help you to feel more empowered as you move into those late weeks of pregnancy and ready yourself for the journey of birth. All right. So time to get busy and start writing down those ideas, thinking about what's important to you. I'm super excited for you guys to have, to feel more prepared and confident and ready for your birth by having prepared your written wishes or verbal, however you want to do that. As I say, there's not one way that we do things. There's lots of different ways, but I encourage you to be realistic. Don't overlook or avoid potentials. Definitely concise is super important. Making sure that you have an effective and friendly language. Harsh language can be a turnoff to the people in your team, and you really want them to be supportive. You also want it to be thorough. So think about before, during, and after, and all of those things, not missing out on anything. I'm excited for you all to create this and move forward with confidence. Thanks so much for joining us for this webinar, and I will definitely send you guys out a lot more resources, but I'm going to take questions. So I will stop sharing and I will also stop recording at this point. But I thanks so much for joining me today. It is so helpful to kind of feel more prepared, and I hope this webinar has done that for you all.